Loads of you getting in touch.
What about the King?
Yeah.
GB News is having a right royal crisis as its viewers are livid about the intervention of our King and his backing of the government and the authorities, the police, the courts. And they clearly, or a lot of them clearly, thought that the King would side with the rioters.
I disagree with Jenny. The palace statement was not balanced and has upset a lot of people.
Because he used the word counter-protest, I think.
Yeah. Andrew says, we feel like we've been let down by the government, the police, the judiciary and now the King.
No.
We feel ignored. That's the issue.
Royal correspondent Jenny Bond appeared on GB News to discuss the King's recent comments about the rioting. And she did a very good job in pushing back at the GB News presenter, Stephen Dixon, who appeared to want to portray disgruntlement about their belief, or their viewers' belief, that the King took the wrong side.
It's called for mutual respect and unity following riots across the country, speaking out for the first time since all this unrest began.
He thanked the police and the emergency services for their efforts to restore peace across the country, and he welcomed how communities have countered the violence.
Well, let's talk to royal commentator Jenny Bond, who joins us now. Good to see you this morning, Jenny. It seems like the King is actually walking a pretty fine line between commentary and politics on this one.
Yes, he is, and I think he's walked it very well. It is a delicate line, as you say, but I actually let out a little cheer when I heard he'd done this. I think this is exactly what a monarch should be doing, giving moral leadership, not political leadership, but moral leadership, and actually calling things as they are. I was pleased he punched quite hard in this, talking about criminality and aggression. And of course, Charles has always been about community spirit and communities uniting for the greater good. So I was very pleased, and I don't think there's anything to criticise him for.
Knowing him as you do, and we sort of have come to know him over the years, you can imagine that he was itching to say something as he sort of, he saw his country sort of in such a terrible protest mire. I don't know what he'd called it, but I can imagine him itching to say something. Do you think he would have had to clear it with number 10?
Yes, I think he'd been kept very much in the loop. He had asked to be kept informed the whole time. And I'm sure he did he probably would have liked to make a speech, but he knows that that's not what he needs to do at the moment. He'd like to go and visit the communities that have been ravaged by these riots, but he knows this is not the time to do that. Because obviously any royal presence like his demands a whole lot of security, and the police have got enough on their hands. So he won't be doing that now, but I think he will be doing it in the future. This is so much at the heart of what Charles has worked for all his years: community spirit, unity within communities. If you look back to business in the community, when he brought businesses and businessmen and he walked them round communities that were disadvantaged and needed help and said, come on, let's do something about it. His pub is the hub. He started that as well, because pubs should be at the heart of the community and provide local services. It's all about getting people together, not dividing them, and least of all, not dividing them on racial or religious terms.
There's been a lot of people getting in touch this morning saying, as royalist as they are, they feel quite let down because they feel like he's siding with those counter-protesters, which indeed Mark Rowley from the Metropolitan Police and Keir Starmer obviously have all said, oh, this is all marvellous, these counter-protests, despite the fact there's been problems and chanting and arrests made at those counter-protests. And a lot of royalists saying, well, we're on the other side of that argument, actually, and we just feel let down. We feel like he shouldn't have intervened on this.
Well, I've got to disagree with them profoundly. I do think this is the leadership we want to see from our monarch. He just wants people to get along with one another. But I can sort of see him saying, for goodness sake, why can't you just get together and love one another, or understand one another at least. Live and let live. That's what he's all about. He's such an inclusive individual. I mean, look at the coronation. He wanted not to be defender of the faith, but a defender of faiths. In the end, what he did was include all faiths in that coronation ceremony. Very unusual. And the congregation looked entirely different to the congregation all those years ago of Elizabeth. He practices what he preaches.
Well, except, forgive me, Jenny, but except, of course, what people will say is that, well, he's not struggling to buy a house. He's not, waiting for an appointment at the hospital or the GPs because of increased numbers in society or whatever it is. So he's not actually facing the same issues that these people with concerns are.
And their point in saying that is what?
Well, is that they feel he's taking a side.
Well, I think he's taking a side on the moral good. He's saying just stop fighting with one another. And I think the compassion of the many against the aggression of the few is a very good phrase indeed. So I will just have to beg to differ. I think this is what the monarch should be doing and is doing and has done all his life as Prince of Wales. And I think he should continue to do this as king. He's not being political. He's being sensible.
And of course, one has to remember that so much of this started because of the terrible attack on the children and the death of those 3 little girls. And he and Camilla were almost first out of the box with a proper tribute to them, weren't they?
Yes, I think this has marked his new reign, actually. The Queen obviously issued statements and very occasionally made broadcasts, and they were very powerful indeed. But I've noticed, I'm sure you have too, Anne, that on big occasions, be they good or bad, the King has been very, very quick in coming forward with his thoughts on it.
Jenny, can I just ask you one more thing before we say goodbye? It's about Catherine. I was just thinking yesterday, we've almost got used to not seeing her, which makes me very worried and sad. Do you think that's just her taking the summer off, or do you think this is not good news?
Oh, no, I think she has in past years, they've taken the summer off. They put their kids first while they can. So I don't know anything about her state of health, and nor should I. But I'm hopeful that come the autumn, we'll start to see a little more of her.
I hope so. How's the weather in Devon today?
Oh, it's a bit cloudy now. Never mind. I'll go out and do some gardening or look after the rear end of the 3 Shetland ponies who produce quite a lot of work.
Oh, that sounds a wonderful
lovely
afternoon, yeah. Have a brilliant sunny day. It's lovely to see you, Jenny.
You too.
Loads of you getting in touch.
What about the King?
Yeah. Just find ones I can...
Yeah,
Jean says, Charles, love him to bits, but not in the real world. Sadly, he has no idea how we have to live.
I think he does have an idea. He's not experienced it.
No.
But I think he really does care.
Y. Decker says, I disagree with Jenny, the palace statement was not balanced and has upset a lot of people.
It's because he used the word counter-protest, I think.
Yeah. A chocolate box lid of the world, says Nevik. Here we go. Andrew says, we feel like we've been let down by the government, the police, the judiciary, and now the King. Oh. We feel ignored. That's the issue.
But obviously, GB News viewers would rather have someone like Trump who sides with them against the establishment. And that's exactly what GB News is. It's an anti-establishment channel which is funded by international billionaires, many of whom don't even live in Britain, and yet they are pandering to the racist mob.
Britain really needs to have a grown-up conversation about why we need immigration. It is fairly simple. We have a large baby boom generation who are living longer than ever. At the same time, our birth rate has been in decline since the 1960s. This has meant that the working age population is shrinking and the retired elderly population is growing, which then puts a requirement on the need for immigration to ensure that we can run our hospitals, run our care homes, run our supermarkets and pubs and restaurants and hotels. It's that simple. GB News, in actually pandering to racists and xenophobes, actually is encouraging or risking more violence because people are feeling justified in feeling aggrieved about living with people who don't come from that area originally. But the truth is that none of us come from this area originally. Even the royal family are not fully British. Whilst people are blaming immigrants for all of their problems, the real problems are not actually in focus. And a lot of those problems are down to crumbling infrastructure, a failing NHS and being starved of funding by the previous government with austerity and Brexit. These political choices have been hugely damaging.
In a council estate in the northeast of England. I'm from exactly these sorts of communities, and I can see what's happened to the town I was brought up in, the 47th poorest place in Britain. All of those concerns are entirely legitimate. They've got nothing to do with desperate people in a hotel. But also it's important to say they're in a hotel because the last government decided for its own electoral gain to stop processing claims, to create and confect this crisis. There's an absolute issue, a legitimate issue about immigration, as there is for every country. But this issue, the conflating of asylum seekers with immigration, the shutting down of the processing of claims to create this desperate need to house people in hotels, that's all been about political choice.
How do you have that discussion then about immigration without being accused of either populism or conflating, as you say, immigration and asylum and all the issues that get bundled together? How do you have it?
Well, at the moment, we have to have a conversation about far-right violence. Yeah. That's a totally separate conversation. We then need a nuanced conversation which involves politicians not deliberately conflating two issues, asylum seekers and immigration. And we need to talk about the costs of not having immigration, the desperate need for workers, which has been a reality of British life really since the Second World War. We don't have a nuanced debate because we conflate two issues and because we won't have the positive conversation that immigration is needed. It obviously, and I don't think anybody questions this, needs to be controlled. Nobody, other than people on the far fringes of politics, talks about open borders. And we don't have anything like open borders. But we do have a need for immigration, like almost every country in the world. And there is a very nuanced conversation that needs to happen. I mean, part of that conversation, I say as somebody who's half African, is the ways in which immigration to Britain can undermine the countries from which those immigrants come. There's an incredibly important conversation that needs to be had. But it's not about boats. It's not about people fleeing war zones. And it certainly isn't about people attacking shops and looting a branch of Greggs and trying to murder people in a hotel. If you are claiming that you are protesting because you are enraged at the murder of children and you set fire to a hotel and block the exit in which other children, a hotel in which other children are sheltering, how can you claim? How can you even dream of claiming that this is a legitimate concern? It's violence.
Organised groups planning activity for the purposes of advancing their ideology, meeting a political objective, then planning really, really serious disruption, then yes, we will consider terrorism offence.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below, let me know what you think, and if you haven't subscribed, make sure you do.